cause in Florida that threatens civil rights of others, you can be certain one man will stand up, speak out, and take action. That man is, of course, Dr. Marvin Dunn.
Man, he is an extraordinary man indeed. Tonight, NBC6 anchor Trina Robinson profiles the civil rights champion. Trina.
Well, Juwan and Jackie, we all feel like we know him. Dr. Dunn is now in his 80s, but he's not slowing down. We take a look at what made this civil rights activist raised in Opelika a towering Florida and national figure who still works nonstop to trounce racism.
Professor Dr. Marvin Dunn, naval officer, psychologist, author, school founder, South Florida civil rights crusader, and distinguished historian.
This is our culture, growing food.
These days, he spends his time tilling his Overtown Teach the Truth garden, fighting for accuracy in Florida's Black history education, handing out books banned in Florida schools, and feeding the poor or giving truth tours where he teaches the history of Black Florida.
But the Sawyer family was part of the Black elite.
All the while beating back racism and injustice wherever it surfaces.
You'll see mango trees larger here.
I met the man who's made a life pursuit of battling for the dignity of all at his childhood neighborhood in Opelika.
I have not really stepped foot on this property in about 50 years.
Tell me what that's like.
And what is it like? I shot marbles right there. Before we moved here, we didn't have electricity.
The former Florida International University professor's mom and dad moved he and his 4 brothers to what remains the Bunch Park community today. By then, his dad a longshoreman, his mom a maid.
Never heard a shot fired in this neighborhood. It was wonderful. Segregated, but wonderful.
But that's not where Marvin Dunn's story starts. As a tiny child, like so many poor blacks.
Down on the ground picking potatoes, we look up, here comes mom in the car with grits and sausage and eggs and all of that. And then she would get down on the ground and pick potatoes with the rest of us. She was incredible. Northwest 151st Street is named after my mother, Marvin Dunn Way, because she came in here as a fighter for education, for social justice, and that's where I think I got the bug, to fight for fairness.
Fairness, something a young Dunn and others with black and brown skin weren't afforded in the old Dade County school system.
But we were bused for at least 2 years from up here all the way to Liberty City, past white schools, past white kids on the streets throwing things at the bus and calling us names.
As a young 11th grader, he was accepted to the prestigious all-black men's school, Morehouse College.
So they put me on that back seat and said, we're going to pray for you, because my mom and grandmother went to church a lot. And they got off the bus, and then my dad got on the bus. And my dad did not go to church. He was a longshoreman. He told me, little N-word, stay on this seat until this bus gets to Atlanta tomorrow. You hear me? Okay, Pop.
But Dunn disobeyed.
Some white person sitting behind me said, get up. You know you don't belong up there. Others chimed in.
Once at Morehouse,
they taught us how to fight with our brains.
After Morehouse,
I was going to be the first black admiral in the Navy.
But he says that dream was nearly derailed by bigotry.
Since I was the only college graduate, they put me in charge of the group, gave me everybody's papers. The petty officer who was in charge of the induction at that point called the 12 white guys up, gave them some tickets to go across the street to the Roosevelt Hotel. After they were gone, he called me up. I had no choice but to go across the railroad track to this house, which was really a house of prostitution, to tell you the truth. And I went back, walked back across the railroad track and took the exam for officer candidate school, and I failed.
Dunn complained about the conditions he endured. So Dunn was relegated to the Navy's recruit program.
This limousine drives up, big black limousine with the Admiral's flags on it. Who's Dunn? And he had that letter that I'd written in Jacksonville in his hand.
He took the exam again and passed.
And that's how I got to be an officer in the Navy. I was one of 4 officers qualified to run this ship. It was just glorious.
Incredible story. And guys, coming up at 7 p.m., I continue my conversation with Dr. Dunn on why an encounter with President John F. Kennedy Jr. changed the entire trajectory of his life and fueled him to wage new fights for justice. Back over to you.
Yeah, he is an incredible man indeed. Great job with that, sir. Looking forward to the next one, Trina. Thank you.
Hearing the history.
Yeah, the history, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Miami-Dade's Dr. Marvin Dunn has been a forefront of almost every major conflict of race and human rights facing South Florida really over the past 6 decades. I sat down with him to talk about his life, his achievements, and how his efforts to preserve a dark season in Florida's Black history recently nearly got him killed.
159th Street Road.
The kid who grew up in Opelika's Bunch Park, renowned historian and social justice warrior, Dr. Marvin Dunn, continues to combat racism even in his 80s. But he took me back to his 4-hour wait for President John F. Kennedy Jr. on the bridge of the USS Kitty Hawk. Kennedy, already outspoken over the Navy's lack of black officers.
That ship had 1,400 officers and one black officer, just one. That's why they wanted me on that bridge. Trina, I tell you, that man looked miserable. For about 3 or 4 seconds, our eyes met. I had never seen more pained, deeper blue eyes than I saw in that man. So when that happened, that night, I decided that I was going to get out of the Navy. I didn't want to be a token paraded out to impress people.
He applies to pursue a doctorate at the University of Florida, but they didn't want him.
Got a letter from the University of Florida, still have it. Dear Lieutenant Dunn, the University of Florida does not admit Negroes to its graduate programs.
The letter goes on to say UF would pay for Dunn to study in any other state.
That I was on a ship, on a warship, defending my country, and I could not get into my own home state university because I'm a black person. So psychology appealed to me, particularly the psychology of race.
Dr. Dunn would put what he learned to work during the 1980 McDuffie riots. Arthur McDuffie, an unarmed black insurance man and former Marine, brutally murdered by 4 Dade County cops who got acquitted.
I went out during the riot. I saw things happening. I saw black boys, 16, 17 years old, killing a white boy who had been trapped in that riot.
Based on the evidence, the charges that were filed were appropriate.
Dunn took on then Dade County State Attorney Janet Reno over the case.
I think it's her damn job to get the evidence. Have her go to the cemetery. The man is buried. That's the evidence. He's dead. What more does she want?
I wrote a book about the riot. I wanted there to be a story of black people in Miami-Dade County that went all the way back to the black pirates who came in the 1640s.
Writing that lynching book took Dunn to Rosewood, the black prosperous town burned to the ground by a white mob who slaughtered dozens of blacks in 1923. Dunn, the filmmaker, actually talked to survivor Robbie Morton.
They did lynch babies. They did, because I seen babies hanging. I sure did. Me.
Dr. Dunn bought 5 acres to preserve the history, but faced violence on his own land last year.
My neighbor rolls up in his big F-150 truck with a Confederate sign on the tag on the front. He lets the window down and he yells at me, "What's going on out here?" I said, "This is a county road, sir. We'll park wherever we want to." Set him into a rage, stepped on the gas, spins around, almost kills us, almost hits my son in particular, and he's screaming the N-word. They arrested him. But when I got back to Miami, I called the FBI and reported this as a hate crime.
The U.S. Justice Department investigated, tried, and found David Allen Emanuel guilty a few months ago on 6 counts of federal hate crimes. In an act of compassion, Dr. Dunn pleaded to the court for leniency. He collects what's called blood soil from locations of Florida's known lynchings. Does that or other parts of the Sunshine State's dark history he writes about anger him?
Even when I go to a place where black people were murdered, were killed, were lynched, anger is not the first thing that comes to me. It's pity, it's sorrow, it's connecting emotionally with the victims. Connect to the emotion of the people who suffered these things. And if you do that, you'll have understanding.
And Dr. Dunn has a new book coming out very soon.